Every fiberglass sailboat you have ever admired is rotting right now, except for a handful of them. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly which 7 monohulls belong on the safe list, why they were built to outlive their owners, and why the perfect moment to buy one is the exact moment you are watching this. That sounds impossible, because the whole reason fiberglass took over the boating world was that it does not rot. That was the sales pitch in the 60s. Plastic boats forever. No worms, no caulking, no soft planks. And yet, marine surveyors will tell you that the modern equivalent of rot is everywhere, hiding under gel coat, spreading in silence, and turning 6-figure cruising boats into liabilities that owners cannot give away. One respected American surveyor became famous for saying that a cored sailboat bottom should be treated as guilty until proven innocent, because you cannot see inside it, you cannot test it properly, and by the time it fails, the failure is already advanced. He said, failures involving cored bottoms are legion. His word, legion. So here is the tension we are going to resolve today. If the disease is invisible, how do you buy a boat that simply cannot catch it? The answer is that a small group of builders, mostly in the 70s and 80s, made a decision that the rest of the industry abandoned, and the boats they built are now the closest thing to permanent that you can own on the water. 7 of them stand above the rest. 1 of them survived being rolled in a hurricane. 1 of them carried a teenager around the planet. 1 of them is so heavily built that owners joke it is not overbuilt, it is grotesquely overbuilt. And 1 of them, the last one on this list, is the boat I would hand my own money over for tomorrow morning for a reason that has nothing to do with fiberglass at all. Stay for that one, because it changes how you should read every listing you see this year. First, you need to understand the disease, because if you do not understand it, every boat at the marina looks the same, and the difference between a keeper and a money pit is invisible to you. When people say a fiberglass boat cannot rot, they are talking about the glass and the resin, and they are mostly right. Glass fibers do not decay. Cured resin does not decay. There are boats from the 50s still sailing, and owners of 50 and 60-year-old hulls report laminate that feels as strong as the day it left the mold. Testing on an old Coast Guard vessel even suggested the laminate had gained tensile strength after 20 years in service. Fiberglass, done properly, is about as close to permanent as anything a human being can own. The problem is that most boats are not made of fiberglass alone. Starting in the 60s and accelerating through the 80s, builders began sandwiching a lightweight core between 2 thin skins of glass: balsa wood, plywood. Later, foam. The engineering logic is beautiful. It works like an I-beam. 2 stiff skins separated by a light spacer give you enormous stiffness for very little weight. Racers loved it. Accountants loved it even more, because core is cheaper than resin and glass. But think about what balsa is. It is wood. It is one of the most absorbent woods on earth. And it is sealed inside your deck and on many boats, inside the hull itself, with hundreds of holes drilled through the outer skin for stanchions, cleats, chain plates, windlasses, and antennas. Every one of those holes is sealed with a bead of caulk that has a working life of maybe 10 or 15 years. When one fitting starts weeping, water reaches the core, and wood that is soaked in the dark does the only thing wood knows how to do: it rots. The skins separate from the mush that used to be structure. The deck goes soft under your feet, and what you have is delamination, which the technical press has described for decades as the functional equivalent of rot in a wooden boat. Same disease, new host. And here is the part that should genuinely scare you if you are shopping right now. A boat with a saturated core can look flawless. The gel coat shines, the interior smells fine. Cruising couples have documented cutting open a beautiful looking foredeck and finding blackened, tar-smelling pulp where the balsa used to be, spread along hidden wiring runs that funneled water sideways for years, with previous owners injecting filler through drill holes just to disguise the soft spots before selling. You cannot see any of that from the cockpit during a sunny sea trial. There's a second disease too, and it attacks even solid hulls: osmosis. Gel coat was supposed to be waterproof. It is not. It is a semi-permeable membrane, and over years of immersion, water molecules migrate through it, find tiny voids in the laminate, dissolve leftover chemicals into an acidic soup, and draw in more water by simple chemistry until pressure raises blisters on the bottom of your boat. Pop one and it weeps sour fluid. In mild cases, it is cosmetic. In severe cases, surveyors have punched their arms straight through holes in the Mediterranean, turning a $250,000 yacht into salvage in one afternoon. The professional cure means peeling the entire underwater gel coat, drying the hull for months, and re-laminating the bottom, which can cost more than an older boat is worth. So the safe list is built on two brutally simple filters. Filter 1, solid hand-laid fiberglass below the waterline, no core in the hull because you cannot rot what does not exist. Filter 2, a builder with a documented record of resin quality and workmanship, because osmosis punishes sloppy chemistry, and the boats with the worst blister epidemics in history were sunk, financially speaking, by one bad resin decision at the factory. Weight is the price you pay. Every boat on this list is heavier and slower than a modern production cruiser. But you are not buying a racehorse. You are buying the marine equivalent of a cast iron pan, and here is the first name. Boat number 1 is the Westsail 32, and there was never any suspense about this because this is the boat the entire concept is built around. Produced in California from 1971 to 1981, roughly 830 hulls. And here is the number that matters. The hull is hand-laid solid fiberglass in 12 alternating layers of woven, roving, and chopped strand mat, with a thickness that runs from about half an inch at the top sides to close to a full inch down at the turn of the bilge. Read that again. Close to an inch of solid glass. Modern production hulls in this size can be a fraction of that. There is no core anywhere in the hull. 7,000 pounds of ballast are encapsulated inside the keel, so there are no keel bolts to corrode, and the shape is a full keel double-ender descended from Colin Archer's Norwegian rescue boats, vessels designed to go out and save people in the North Sea when everything else was running for harbor. The sailing community has argued for 50 years about whether this boat is overbuilt or grotesquely overbuilt, and that is a genuine quote from the forums, not my joke. It earned the cruel nickname Wet Snail because it will not win races. But owners answer with a question that ends the argument. Do you buy a boat for the average Tuesday or for the one storm you did not see coming? A Westsail named Satori was famously abandoned in the 1991 Halloween storm, the one the movie The Perfect Storm was based on. And after her crew was rescued, the empty boat rode out the storm alone and washed up on a beach, essentially intact. They pulled her off the sand and she sailed again. That is what an inch of hand-laid glass buys you. One honest warning, because this channel does not sell fantasies. The hull cannot rot, but the deck is plywood sheathed in fiberglass, and plywood absolutely can rot if fittings have been neglected. About half of all Westsails were also sold as kits and finished by their owners, so no two interiors are alike, and quality below decks ranges from shipyard beautiful to garage project. Survey the deck hard, buy on the hull, and you own a boat that will outlive your grandchildren. But this raises an obvious question. If thick, solid glass is the answer, why did almost everyone stop building this way? Hold that thought, because the answer is hiding inside boat number 4. Boat number 2 is the Cape Dory 36, and if the Westsail is a Viking rescue boat, this is a New England church pew. Built in Massachusetts, drawn by Carl Alberg, a designer who essentially spent his whole career refining one idea, the long-keeled, low-slung, endlessly sea-kindly cruiser. The hull is solid hand, laid glass, and owners who have cut into it for through hull work report better than half an inch of laminate a foot below the waterline on a 36-foot boat. Hull flex is simply not a conversation Cape Dory owners have. The ballast is encapsulated. The bronze hardware came from the builder's own foundry, Spartan Marine, and the whole boat radiates a level of material honesty that modern builders cannot afford to imitate. What makes the Cape Dory special on this list is motion. A narrow beam and a soft bilge give it a gentle, predictable roll instead of the snappy jerk of a flat-bottomed modern hull, and that matters more than any spec sheet. The moment you are 20 hours into a rough passage, and your crew is deciding whether they ever want to sail with you again. Sailors on the racing forums sneer that Cape Dories are motor sailors. Cape Dory owners cross oceans and do not answer, which tells you who won. Prices are the quiet scandal here. These boats routinely change hands for less than the cost of a new family car, for a hull that will still be structurally sound when that car is scrap metal. And if a 36-footer is more boat than you need, the same solid glass philosophy runs through the whole Cape Dory line, from the 25 to the 33, like a family recipe nobody was allowed to change. Boat number 3 is the Pacific Seacraft 34, and this is where the list stops being about brute thickness and starts being about intelligence. Because this boat is widely described as the finest engineered small cruiser America ever produced. Bill Krelock, the same naval architect behind the West Sail's refinement, drew a hull that is solid hand, laid fiberglass below the waterline, but shaped with a delicacy the West Sail never had. Including his signature canoe stern, designed to part following seas, so a breaking wave slides around the boat instead of slamming into a flat transom. Where the West Sail is a fortress, the Pacific Seacraft is a scalpel that happens to be bulletproof. The construction details are the kind of thing you only appreciate after you have owned a lesser boat. Bulkheads fully tabbed to hull and deck, hardware mounted through solid glass pads rather than crushed core, a flange-type hull-to-deck joint that is bolted and bonded into what is functionally one piece. This is why the model earned a spot in the informal Hall of Fame of offshore designs, and why used prices stay stubbornly high while comparable boats depreciate. You pay for the engineering once, and then it protects you every single mile. If your dream is a couple crossing oceans in comfort and arriving rested, this hull, or its bigger sister, the 37, is the standard everything else on this list gets measured against. So why is it only number 3? Because 2 boats later, there is a story no spec sheet can compete with. Boat number 4 is the Island Packet 31, and this is also where I answer the question I asked you to hold. The industry abandoned thick, solid glass because of money and marketing, but one Florida builder refused and turned that refusal into a cult. Bob Johnson, an actual naval architect who founded Island Packet, kept building solid fiberglass hulls with full-length keels and encapsulated ballast right through the era when everyone else was chasing lighter, cheaper, faster. The 31 displaces 11,000 pounds, carries its tanks and ballast low inside that protected keel, and shrugs off the groundings that would send a bolted fin keel boat straight to the yard for a structural survey. Here is why the Island Packet earns its place over a dozen similar boats. The cult following is not nostalgia, it is feedback. Thousands of these boats have been cruised hard in the shallow, unforgiving waters of the Bahamas and the American East Coast for 4 decades. And the fleet's reputation was built by owners reporting year after year that nothing structural ever happens. They are not fast, nobody cares. The boat became famous for exactly one promise, that it will get you there in safety and comfort. And it has kept that promise for so long that surveyors relax slightly when one comes up on the schedule. In a market where trust is the scarcest commodity, that is worth more than a knot of boat speed. And for buyers, the practical news is wonderful. Island Packet built many sizes on the same philosophy. So whether your budget says 27 feet or 38, there is a solid glass version of this exact idea waiting for you. Boat number 5 is the Contessa 26, the smallest boat on this list and the one with the best story in the history of small boat voyaging. Solid fiberglass hull, long keel, a shape drawn from the same Nordic folkboat bloodline that has been surviving ugly northern seas since the 1940s. On paper, it is a modest little cruiser. In reality, this is the boat that Tanya Aby's father bought her in New York when she was 18 years old, reportedly giving her a choice between college tuition and a boat on the condition that she sail it around the world alone. She left with almost no experience. She came back at 21, having circumnavigated the planet in a 26-foot boat, and her Contessa, named Varuna, held together through everything the oceans could invent for her. Think about what that means for you as a buyer. The question with a small boat is never comfort. It is whether the structure can take open ocean punishment for years without complaint. And this design answered that question with the most public stress test imaginable, sailed by a teenager. The British-built sister ship, the Contessa 32, wrote its own legend by being one of the very few small yachts to come through the catastrophic 1979 Fastnet race storm with its class reputation enhanced. If your budget is tight, this is the sleeper on the list, because tiny classic boats are the cheapest they have been in a generation, and the hull you are buying has a resume most 50-footers cannot match. But a resume from the 70s raises a fair objection. Were all boats from that golden era built this well? No. And in about 4 minutes, I'm going to name the famous boats that look identical to these 7 and are quietly disastrous, so do not touch a listing site until we get there. Boat number 6 is the Dufour Arpege 30, the European entry, and proof that this philosophy was never just an American obsession. Michel Dufour was an engineer before he was a boat builder, and when he launched the Arpege in 1966, he built the hull in solid fiberglass at a time when French production quality was becoming the envy of the sailing world. Around 1,500 were built, an enormous run for the era, which tells you the market recognized something special. The boat won admirers for a rare combination, a solid, honest structure wrapped around a hull that actually sails beautifully, quick enough to race, mannerly enough to cruise, with clever interior joinery that made 30 feet feel like more. The reason the Arpege matters on this list is availability and price on the European side of the Atlantic. If you are shopping in France, Spain, Italy, or Greece, the American classics are rare and overpriced there, but Arpeges are everywhere, often absurdly cheap. And the solid hull means a tired example is a cosmetic project rather than a structural one. There's one caveat, and it applies to the whole list, so listen carefully. The hulls are solid on these boats, but decks vary. And on the Arpege, the deck may or may not be cored depending on the boat and the year. The hull cannot rot. The deck must still be surveyed like a crime scene. That rule has no exceptions anywhere in this video. Boat number 7, the one I promised, is the Pearson 365. And the reason I would spend my own money here has nothing to do with fiberglass, although the fiberglass is excellent. It is arithmetic. Pearson was one of the pioneers of the entire fiberglass boat industry. The company literally helped invent the category in the 50s. And by the time the 365 appeared in the 70s, they were laying up solid, heavy, unglamorous hulls with the confidence of a builder who had made thousands of them. The boat is a full keel cruiser with generous accommodation, honest sailing manners, and a time-proven reputation that surveyors respect. Now, the arithmetic. Pearson built these in volume, and volume is the buyer's best friend 50 years later. Rarity creates collector prices. Volume creates choice. At any given moment, there are multiple 365s on the market, which means you are never emotionally hostage to one listing. You can walk away, you can compare, you can wait for the boat whose previous owner already spent the painful money on the engine, the rigging, and the sails. On a 5-decade-old boat, the hull is the one thing you cannot economically replace and the one thing this list guarantees. Everything else is a shopping list, and with a high-volume classic, somebody else has usually paid for most of it. That is the secret logic of the entire safe list. Buy the irreplaceable part in perfect condition and let the previous owner subsidize the rest. So that is the 7. Now, let me save you from the trapdoors, because the used market is full of boats that look exactly like the ones I just described and will financially destroy you. And the cruelest examples are famous, respected names. Start with the Valiant 40. It is a brilliant Bob Perry design, a genuine offshore legend, and I left it off the list for one reason. During a stretch of production, the builder used a fire-retardant resin, and hulls from that era became notorious for blistering. Not the usual scattering of pimples near the waterline, but blisters climbing halfway up the topsides. Some boats were fixed properly and are wonderful. Others are ticking invoices. The point is not that Valiants are bad. It is that one resin decision at a factory 40 years ago can matter more than the entire design, which is why the safe list rewards builders with clean chemistry records. Uniflight powerboats from the same resin era carry the same curse. Next, teak decks over cord decks. And the boat that breaks hearts here is the gorgeous Tayana 37. Owners have described decks soft from bow to stern because a traditional teak overlay is fastened with hundreds, sometimes thousands of screws driven straight through the outer skin into the core, and every screw is a future leak. The American builder Hinckley refused to install teak decks for precisely this reason, asking why anyone would ruin a perfectly sound deck by drilling thousands of holes in it. When you see teak on a listing photo, do not see luxury, see a countdown. Then there are the known blister families, like the Gulf Stars of the 70s. Handsome, comfortable boats where the assumption among brokers is simply that any survivor has already had an epoxy bottom job, and if it has not, you were the one paying for it. None of this makes these boats worthless. It makes them negotiations, but the 7 on the safe list let you skip the negotiation entirely. Before you go look at anything, learn the one skill that costs nothing and finds what brokers hide: tap testing. Take a small plastic hammer or even a coin and tap the deck and hull every 2 to 3 inches, listening for the change from a sharp crack to a dull thud. Sharp means solid. Dull means separation, moisture, or filler. Pay special attention around every through hole, every stanchion base, every chain plate, and anywhere the gel coat shows a suspiciously fresh patch. Surveyors do this professionally with moisture meters, and you should absolutely pay for a full survey before buying. But 10 minutes with a coin will tell you whether a boat deserves a survey at all. On a solid glass hull from the safe list, that tapping session turns into the most boring and most beautiful sound in boat buying. The same clean crack over and over for the length of the hull. Which brings us to the payoff I promised at the start. The reason the timing of this video is not an accident. The used boat market has flipped. The pandemic years were a feeding frenzy where anything that floated sold instantly, sometimes above its original price. That bubble is gone. Brokers on both sides of the Atlantic are now describing a market where supply has exploded. Buyers have become patient and ruthless. Older monohulls sit unsold for months or years. And by some professional estimates, roughly 30% of listed boats may never find a buyer at all, partly because so much demand has migrated to catamarans. For sellers, that is misery. For you, it is the single best entry point in decades, because the boats being marked down hardest are exactly the category this video is about. Older monohulls and the safe list holes are hiding in that discount bin, priced no differently than their rotting lookalikes. The market cannot tell the difference between a soggy cord deck and an inch of solid glass. After the last 25 minutes, you can. That asymmetry is your entire advantage, and it will not last forever, because these 7 models stopped being built decades ago and the fleet only shrinks. So here's what you do with all of this. Pick the boat that matches your life. The Fortress if you dream of high latitudes, the Church Pew if you want gentle miles, the Scalpel if you want engineering, the Colt Classic if you want reliability with a community behind it, the Giant Killer if your budget is small and your ambitions are not, the European if you are shopping in the Mediterranean, the Volume Classic if you want leverage. Then find 3 of them, bring a coin, tap every inch, hire a surveyor for the finalist, and buy the one thing in this entire hobby that genuinely does not rot. The people who built these 7 boats believed a hull should outlast the person who bought it, and half a century later, the ocean has graded their work. Everything else on the water is negotiating with time. These 7 already won. If this saved you from a soft deck and a 6-figure mistake, pass it along to the friend who keeps sending you listings, and I will see you on the water.